Bang! Neeves knives. I'm Jared, and this is 5 Tucson knives I don't really like. Some of the knives on this list are great knives. They're not personally for me. Now, this one is a 201. It is a Rattlesnake design. It's in 14C28N. I do like the blade shape. The grind is good. I like the steel, but there are some things I don't like. Now, one, I don't like faux carbon fiber. This is G10 with like a carbon fiber, like just a little piece of carbon fiber glued on the face of it, and then they mill it out. I'm not a big fan of that stuff. I just like G10 or carbon fiber, one or the other. Now, I'm sure it's probably real carbon fiber, but I'm just not a big fan of it. It's a very thin layer, but it does have T8 construction, which I do like. Great access to the lock bar. But we have a lot of detent lash, or detent, not play, but where you sit there and fumble around with the detent. I don't like that. I'm trying to think of the name of it, but double clutching, I guess you could call it. I think that's what Metal Complex calls it. But you can hold it low and get past, but you see how where I got to kind of like let it just hit just the little tiniest part of the tip of my thumb to be passed, because if I hold it up any higher, it just happens to land right there on the detent. I don't like that. The flipper tab works great. So the flipping action is awesome. The build quality is pretty good. It's decent, especially for the price range. It's actually really good. So it's hard for me to complain about these things. This is a budget knife, you know. You can't expect the world with this price. This is probably around 30 bucks you could get this for. It does have a deep carry clip. I'm not a big fan of those screws. This one probably works just fine, but you do have to get over those screws with your pocket. It does have a stop pin right here instead of a internal stop pin. Sometimes Tucson does do stop pins like that, which is okay. It is locked up very solid, and it's a good solid knife. The ergos are pretty good. I mean, I feel the clip quite a bit because it just happens to land right there, you know, but decent ergos. It's going to cut good. I'm not a huge fan of the plunge grind. You can see it literally plunges all the way to the edge. I do not like that. So there's just things about this that make it where I personally, for me, wouldn't buy it after reviewing it, or after checking it out. Now, next one. This one is a Jelly Jerry design, the 217. Now, I did a first impressions on this. I planned on doing a review on it. I'm not sure I will. A lot of people didn't even watch the first impressions, but that's not the reason why. It's not for me. It's just not my kind of knife, or not my style. Now, I like, it's kind of weird because it does sit in that range where it is my style of knife. There's so many things I like about it, but there's things that just really draw me away from it. And I like Jelly Jerry's designs. There are so many designs that I like that he has. I even have some of them, or have had some of them. Now, one thing I don't like is this is very squared off. So it's like when you get it in hand, it's comfortable in a lot of ways, but it's also very square. So that's one thing. Now, just putting it in my hand like this, it's nice. It's pretty good. But everything else, I can really tell it's squared off. Like even this action, when I go to front flip it, I can feel the corners and how far I have to reach over across the carbon fiber and titanium to get to this. And I'm not a big fan of the jimping. I hate when they literally leave no jimping on the top. That makes no sense to me. It just makes it slippery on the top. This is supposed to be a front flipper, so the jimping should go all the way up to the very top and around the top. But you can still do it pretty easily, but I'm just not a big fan of it. And then you have the secondary deployment, which is the hole. Now, this wouldn't be bad if it wasn't so squared off, but I have to literally fight to get my finger in there to get it. So you can do it. It just, I don't like it. I have to, instead of just putting my finger like this and just going, I have to like reposition my hand to go sideways, and I don't really like that. So those are like the main, and I can't use my thumb at all. Those are the main reasons. Now, a couple other reasons that I don't really like this is, you know, going up here, you know, to like the cuts and stuff. Like I said, it's squared off around these corners. So it's comfortable, but I can feel this little edge right here. Look at that. So do you see how they did like a reverse bolster? A bolster lock normally is covered down here, and this is open. Instead, they left this open and covered up here, which in return makes it where the lock bar moves away from the scale on this side, and then you have a corner right here poking you. So when I'm like this, it's really poking me, and then when I squeeze it, I can feel it moving, and then it's also getting into this lock bar. I do not like the access to this lock bar, and I really like lock bar access. This thing does not give me good lock bar access. Now, the build quality in many ways is really, really good, but it's just not me. It's not for me. And your hands might be able to do it better than I can. This, I wish they would have done something with this edge. It's just so, I don't know, sharp, not sharp. It's not sharp at all, but just something about it. But yeah, there you guys go. Let me get to the next one. I just want to say though, this thing does have good build quality in a lot of ways. There's just those little details drive me nuts. Now the next one. This one's probably going to be a surpriser for a lot of you guys, but the Tucson TS313. Why is this one not my style? Now, let me just say they did do a good job, meaning this was their first button lock, and in a lot of ways, this thing is amazing. Amazing build quality in so many ways. The detent is very strong, which I don't mind that. That's okay. But these thumb studs are pretty sharp around the edge. So that's one thing. I wish it was like where it had like a chamfer around the edge that was big, that wasn't sharp, where I have a lot of leverage onto it. But that's not really that big of a deal. I just want to say that right now, that's not that big of a deal to me. But the things that are is this. So we have the tip that hangs out right here. I can literally rub the tip. Now, the owner wants me to sharpen that out. Not a problem. But here comes the problem. So this tip area is super thick. This is probably, I forget what I measured it at, but it's probably 45 thousandths. But look at this side. Now watch when I flip it. It doesn't match. And what I'm looking at is this swedge. Look at how far this swedge goes up. It goes up to right there. This side, it's way back here. So that right there is going to make it difficult to sharpen out. It's not going to match up. The grind from this side to this side is off. And sharpening it out, it's probably 45 thousandths thick right now. Imagine how thick it's going to be when I sharpen out enough steel to where you're not touching it right here. I don't even know if I'll sharpen it all the way out, but after sharpening a majority of it out, it's probably going to be 50 thousandths behind the edge right here. Even for a hard use knife, that is entirely way too thick. Right here is nice and thin though. This is a really nice grind right here. It's a hollow grind. Well done. But that tip is just dramatically thick. I mean, it's just look at how thick this thing is. That is just way too thick, and you can actually see the grind, how it's off from this side to the other side. You can actually see it right there. So that's really the main reason. Everything else is really good. I mean, it does have a little bit of spring lash right here. Some people might call it detent lash. Not that big of a deal. It is a button lock, and it is on multi-row bearings. It's one of the smoothest button locks I've ever felt. It is the smoothest I've ever felt, and it has the strongest detent I've ever felt. It is locked up like a brick. I mean, it is very, very solid. This spring is incredibly strong. There are so many great qualities to this knife. Not into speed holes, though. I don't like speed holes, so that's another thing. But the main thing is just that front grind. Next, this one is the Tucson 135. The Tucson 135. Now, there is a bunch of cool things about this knife. It's pretty cool. The flipping action is really good. I like this lock bar access. It's very, very smooth. It is kind of addicting to flip. These little inlays are comfortable. They swell out. So it's kind of cool to have this little pinch. And like I said, this thing, the lock bar is really nice. Now, it does have a late detent, and it just happens to be right where that flipper tab lands on your finger. So that's not good, but that's not really the reason why. The reason why I do not like this, and this is not my style, is because of this blade. So, you look at this blade. Love the blade shape. It looks really cool. It's very useful because when you're like this tip aims up, so you can easily get to utility cuts. And I imagine this is very useful for a lot of people, especially like in an office setting where all you're doing is opening up packages and things. But this grind makes no sense at all. No sense. When I say make it make sense, does not make sense. Now, like I said, I'm sure this is very useful for some people out there, and it works. So for me personally, it doesn't make sense. Look at how short it is. It's not even a full flat grind. They put a swedge up top, and the flat grind starts here. So the grind is only this thick. Do you know that this thing is as thick as the thinnest point on my Spartan Harsey? 25 thousandths. So look at my Spartan Harsey. This is a hard use folder. I guess what some people could call a tactical folder or a hard use folder. Look at the size of the stop pin. Nice big stop pin. Nice thick frame lock. Very, very solid knife. Yeah, it makes sense. And look how tall my grind is. So, you know, a knife like this, it's okay to have 25 thousandths. You have a tall grind. It's hard use. That does not make sense. The grind should not be that thick. Starting off, right here, 25 thousandths. Now, it's a little thinner back here, but do you use that part of the knife? I mean, maybe. I mean, I guess for push cuts, yeah, you do. But for slicing and everything, you have the thickest portion right here. It does thin out a little tiny bit towards the tip, but even look at that. That's like an axe. That's literally like an axe. The geometry is similar to an axe. And guess what has the worst geometry for cutting? An axe. Axes are made for chopping. This is not a chopper. So that is why it's just not my style. It's just entirely too short of a grind for how thick behind the edge it is. The grind is similar to an axe. Now, if it was a hollow grind, it would make more sense because you have such a little tiny short. I mean, how tall is this? I'm just curious. What do we have? Not even a half inch. We have like 3/8. 1, 2. Yeah, 3/8 high. A little bit more than that. So if I go all the way down to the bottom. I mean, that is entirely way too short for this thick of a grind. So, and the clip is okay. It doesn't have a lot of ramp right there. It's a very short ramp. There's a lot of other little nitpicks I could say, but all in all, the quality's really good. The action's really good. There are a lot of things to like about this knife. I really like the blade shape. I think it's very useful for the tip. If you're only using this thing for like this, just to open things up, great knife. And if you're looking for a knife to just open things up, this would work great. It really would. Now, last one. Now, the last one, I want to say, in my opinion, is the best one on this list. I actually kind of like it. It's just not my style. It is the Tucson TS103. Now, it's very comfortable in the hand. I like this little spot right there where I can get nice and close to the blade. I actually, so I heard somebody make a comment, like, do we even use our knives? And I'm thinking like, yeah, I do. But I like to get up nice and close to my blade when I'm doing push cuts and cuts like this, especially at work when I'm like really hammering through thick cardboard. But and this, winds up working out. That's what I meant to say. Anyways, but there's little details that make this knife not my style. The action, great. The drop, once you get past that detent, it's really good. It does have internal stop pins. I like that. Very solid from all directions. It is in D2. I'm not even worried about that. So, the blade shape. The blade shape is very, very pokey. Now, if you are using this knife primarily for like self-defense or something, then yeah, maybe. But in that case, I mean, I guess you'd be fine. You wouldn't slip up the blade. But in that case, yes. The tip is very dainty while having a thick grind. So for slicing and cutting, it's not going to be that great. It's just a thick grind. I mean, it's very short grind while being thicker behind the edge, and it dramatically gets to a thick point. It's not like it's a full flat grind. You see where they started the grind. They have this swedge up here. So the thickest part of the knife or of the blade is right here, this line. Then it starts going down to the edge. So from here to here, it dramatically drops fast. So that's one thing. The geometry isn't great on this knife. Now, it wouldn't be that big of a deal on certain blade shapes because it would make more sense then. Those blade shapes would be like harder use blade shapes, right? Well, this one extends it all the way out to this dainty, dainty little tip. So trying to use this grind for maybe what it's for, you're going to break that tip. So for just opening things up, yeah, great. If you need to do, and this probably is a great knife for a lot of people because they probably use it to open things up and every once in a while make a cut. In that case, yeah, it's great. It's great. And I understand a lot of people, that's how they use their knives. A lot of people do one primary task the most and sometimes do another type of cut. It's a good knife. It really is. I don't want to beat on this one too bad because this one's actually a pretty solid knife and it works great. The lock bar access isn't great, but it's easy to get to, if that makes sense. They didn't really give you much access. They just chamfered both sides right here, but it's pretty easy and the lock bar is very comfortable. The detent is snappy, very snappy. And the flipper tab, even though it's so small, it works fantastic. Like I said, the ergos are nice and comfortable. The titanium's well done. The clip is just fine. Now, taking it out of the pocket, your pants bind up right. Damn it, camera. Your pants bind up in this corner right here when you go to take it out of your pocket. That's something I don't like. But other than that, it's basically just that. Oh, no, there is one other thing. This choil, this plunge grind. Look at this. One sharpening, my edge is touching this right here. So now I'm going to have to be careful not to sharpen this. And this is the plunge grind. So I just don't like that. Now I can put in a choil, no problem. Not an issue at all. No stop pin in the way or anything like that. I can easily cut in a choil without having any issues. But, it's just, I don't know if I'd want to. If it'd be that worth it to me to do that. But it would probably clean it up a little bit better. And then you'd be able to lay back the edge. Because laying back the edge on this, changing the angle on this, I would have to do it. In order for me to ever want to use this knife for any type of cutting tasks, I would want to change the angle. I'd want to lay this back to like 17 degrees per side. Now doing that, my edge bevel is going to get bigger. And then by doing that, it's going to take away all of this steel right here. Now, in return, there is something else that's going to happen. This tip is going to get even daintier. That is the problem sometimes when you have too fine of a tip, but too thick of a grind. Because you want to lay back the edge on the grind, but you have to worry about your tip, because your tip will get so fine that just using it, it'll just chip off. You know, so that doesn't make sense to me. That makes it to where you're crippling me one way or another. Either one, I leave it the way it is and it's only a tip knife, or two, I want to make it a good cutter, but now my tip chips. So it just is what it is. That's you know, so it just doesn't make sense to me. But like I said, all in all, this one is a good knife, and I could see a lot of people being just fine with it and just sharpening it at the angle it is, because they don't really cut that much stuff, and it's just very light duty cutting. You know, when you're only cutting strings here and there and opening boxes, your geometry doesn't matter. So there you guys go. I love you guys, and I appreciate you guys watching. Please don't take any offense to any of these knives, because, you know, we all have our preferences, and I have mine. And if one of your favorite knives are on this list, I'm happy for you, man. I'm happy that you have a knife that you love, because we all have different preferences. That's just the way it is, and these are mine. I love you guys. Peace.